Rain hammered against the giant glass windows of the Whitmore family mansion while laughter echoed through the luxurious dining hall. Expansive chandeliers glowed above dozens of wealthy guests dressed in designer clothes as waiters moved carefully between tables carrying wine and expensive food. Outside the massive front gate, parked luxury cars stretched across the entire street like a car show for millionaires, and standing alone in the storm was Marcus Hill. Water dripped from his black delivery jacket while he held 2 catering bags tightly against his chest. His old Honda sat near the curb with one flickering headlight, and smoke quietly rising from the hood. Marcus looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes after working almost 16 hours, straight, delivering food around Houston just to help pay his little sister's hospital bills. He walked toward the mansion entrance carefully while thunder exploded overhead. Before he could knock, the giant doors suddenly opened. Warm light spilled outside. A tall white man wearing an expensive tuxedo looked Marcus up and down with visible disgust. "You're dripping water everywhere," the man snapped coldly. Marcus lowered his eyes politely. "Sorry, sir. I have the catering order." The man didn't move. Guests inside the mansion turned toward Marcus immediately. Some whispered quietly while others stared openly at him like he didn't belong anywhere near the property. Marcus had experienced those looks his entire life. The tuxedo man sighed dramatically before speaking louder. "Back entrance. People are eating." Several guests laughed softly. Marcus swallowed his pride and nodded. "Yes, sir." As he walked around the side of the mansion through heavy rain, he heard another voice behind him. "Wait." Marcus turned. A little white girl around 8 years old stood near the doorway wearing pink pajamas. She smiled kindly at him while holding a stuffed rabbit. "You forgot this," she said softly, pointing toward one of the drink containers almost slipping from the bag. Marcus smiled back despite the humiliation. "Thank you." Before the girl could respond, her father grabbed her shoulder firmly. "Emily," he said sharply. "Inside." Now, the little girl looked confused. "But Dad now." She slowly disappeared back into the mansion while the door slammed shut again. Marcus continued toward the back entrance, feeling something heavy inside his chest. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore. It was that familiar feeling he could never escape no matter how hard he worked. The feeling that some people already decided your value the second they saw your skin. Inside the kitchen area, cooks and servants rushed everywhere preparing food for the massive charity gala happening inside the mansion. Marcus placed the catering bags on the counter, while the head chef checked the order quickly. "You're late," the chef muttered. Marcus glanced toward the storm outside. Roads are flooded. The chef barely listened. Marcus pulled out his phone, hoping to see a message from the hospital, but nothing appeared. His younger sister Ava had surgery scheduled tomorrow morning, and doctors already warned him they still needed more payment before certain treatments could continue. That thought alone had been destroying him for weeks. "You waiting for a tip?" Another worker joked nearby. Some kitchen staff laughed. Marcus forced a weak smile. "No, ma'am." He turned to leave when suddenly loud screaming exploded from inside the mansion. Everyone froze. A glass shattered somewhere in the dining hall. Then another scream came. Marcus ran toward the sound instinctively while guests panicked near the staircase. People pushed past each other in confusion while music abruptly stopped. At the center of the crowd, little Emily lay unconscious on the floor. Her mother cried hysterically beside her. "Oh my God! Emily! Emily, wake up!" The little girl's face looked pale blue. One guest shouted nervously, "Call 911." Another yelled, "She's not breathing." Chaos erupted instantly. People surrounded the child, but nobody moved correctly. Some guests screamed, others pulled out phones. Emily's father looked completely frozen in panic. Marcus pushed through the crowd, immediately moved. Several wealthy guests stared angrily at him. "Who let him in here?" someone snapped. Marcus ignored them and dropped beside Emily. He checked her pulse quickly. Nothing. His heartbeat accelerated. "Asthma?" Marcus asked urgently. Emily's mother nodded while crying uncontrollably. "She has severe allergies. I think something was in the food. Please help her." Marcus looked around desperately. "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" Nobody answered. Some guests simply stared at him uncertainly, like they couldn't decide whether to trust him. Emily's breathing became weaker. Marcus made a decision instantly. "Listen to me carefully," he shouted. "I need space." Something in his voice changed the room. People moved back. Marcus tilted Emily's head carefully and started emergency procedures with shocking precision. His hands moved fast, but controlled, calm, experienced. Guests stared in confusion. "Where did he learn that?" someone whispered. Emily's father knelt beside Marcus desperately. "Can you save her?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He focused completely on the child. Seconds felt like hours. Then suddenly Emily coughed violently. Air rushed back into her lungs. The room exploded with gasps. Her mother broke down crying in relief while hugging her daughter tightly. She's breathing. Oh my God. Paramedics stormed into the mansion moments later, but by then Marcus had already stabilized her condition. One medic looked shocked while checking Emily's pulse. You medico? He asked Marcus. Marcus stood slowly. He used to be. The entire room became silent. Emily's father stared at him carefully now. What do you mean used to be? Marcus hesitated for a second, then quietly answered, I was an emergency trauma doctor in Chicago. Nobody spoke. It felt like the entire mansion stopped breathing. A wealthy guest laughed awkwardly. Yeah, right. But Marcus didn't react. The paramedic suddenly looked closer at him. Wait, Marcus Hill? Marcus looked uncomfortable immediately. The medic's eyes widened. You worked at Merced General, didn't you? Marcus nodded slowly. I saw you speak at a trauma conference years ago, the medic said in disbelief. You were one of the best surgeons in Illinois. Now the room truly froze. Emily's father looked horrified, remembering how he treated Marcus at the door less than 30 minutes earlier. The same man he forced into the rain had just saved his daughter's life. Marcus picked up his wet delivery jacket quietly. I should go. Wait. Emily's mother whispered emotionally. Please don't leave. Marcus paused. Tears streamed down her face as she walked toward him. You saved my little girl. Marcus lowered his eyes awkwardly. I'm glad she's okay. But one older guest crossed his arms suspiciously. If you're really a doctor, he asked coldly, then why are you delivering food? The question sliced through the room. Marcus stood silently for several seconds while rain thundered outside. Finally, he answered softly. Because hospitals stopped hiring me. Nobody moved. Marcus continued quietly. After years in emergency medicine, I filed complaints against another surgeon for racist treatment toward black patients. The hospital covered it up. I became the problem instead. Some guests looked uncomfortable now. Marcus forced a painful smile. Funny how fast your career disappears when powerful people decide they don't want you around anymore. Emily's father looked ashamed for the first time all night. What hospital, Missy General? One woman near the staircase suddenly gasped. My husband works there, she whispered. There was a huge scandal years ago. Marcus nodded once. Exactly. The room stayed painfully quiet. For years Marcus had lived with humiliation after humiliation. Hospitals rejected him quietly. Recommendations disappeared. Interviews stopped coming. Friends distanced themselves because associating with controversy became dangerous. Eventually, bills destroyed everything. Marcus sold his condo, then his car, then almost every possession he owned. Now he delivered food 18 hours a day just to keep his sister alive. Emily suddenly reached toward him weakly from her mother's arms. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus smiled gently. You're welcome, kiddo. Before he could leave again, Emily's father stepped forward. I owe you an apology. Marcus looked at him calmly. The wealthy man swallowed hard. When you arrived tonight, he admitted quietly, I judged you. Marcus said nothing. The man looked ashamed now. I saw your clothes, your car, your skin, and I assumed things about you. Several guests looked away uncomfortably. Marcus finally responded softly. That happens a lot. Those 4 words hit harder than shouting ever could. The mansion suddenly felt colder despite all the expensive lights. Emily's father took a deep breath. My name is Richard Whitmore, he said, and I'd like to help you. Marcus immediately shook his head. I didn't save her for money. I know. Richard looked emotional now. But your sister deserves treatment, and you deserve your life back. Marcus stared at him carefully, unsure whether to believe any of this was real. Then another guest interrupted loudly. Richard, be careful. You don't know this man. Marcus felt the room shift again instantly. There it was. The suspicion, the fear, the reminder that saving a life still wasn't enough for some people. Marcus slowly put his jacket back on. Do you know what? He said quietly. Forget it. Richard stepped forward quickly. Marcus, no. Marcus shook his head tiredly. I appreciate your daughter being okay. That's enough. He turned toward the front door while rain continued pouring outside. But before he could leave, little Emily shouted weakly from across the room. Daddy, don't let him go. The innocence in her voice stopped everyone. Richard looked toward his daughter, then back toward Marcus. Finally, he made a decision. Tomorrow morning, he said firmly, I want you at my office. Marcus frowned. What? Richard's expression became serious. Because I own Whitmore Medical Systems. Marcus froze. Several guests gasped softly. Whitmore Medical Systems was one of the largest healthcare companies in Texas. They owned hospitals, trauma centers, clinics, and private medical programs across multiple states. Marcus stared at Richard in disbelief. You're kidding. I'm not. Richard walked closer. And after tonight, I think it's time I looked deeper into why one of the best trauma doctors in America ended up delivering food in the rain. Marcus didn't know what to say. For years, every powerful person turned away from him. Now one stood directly in front of him, offering hope. But Marcus had learned something painful about hope. Sometimes it hurts worse than disappointment. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Whitmore Medical Headquarters wearing his only clean suit. The building towered over downtown Houston with giant glass walls reflecting the sunrise like a symbol of wealth and power Marcus no longer recognized. Employees stared at him strangely while he entered the lobby. Some recognized him from the gala story already spreading online. Others simply saw another black man in an old suit. Richard Whitmore personally greeted him upstairs. "You came," Richard said. Marcus looked nervous. "I almost didn't." Richard nodded honestly. "I probably wouldn't trust me either." Inside the office, Richard handed Marcus a thick folder. Marcus opened it carefully, his eyes widened. Inside were internal reports from Mercy General Hospital years earlier. Complaints, investigations, witness statements, hidden evidence. "You are telling the truth," Richard said quietly. "About everything." Marcus's hands trembled slightly. Richard sat across from him. "The surgeon you reported had multiple racial discrimination complaints buried by hospital executives. Your career was sacrificed to protect their reputation." Anger and pain surged through Marcus instantly. All these years, all this suffering, because powerful people chose convenience over justice. Richard leaned forward seriously. "I can't erase what happened to you, but I can help fix part of it." Marcus looked up slowly. Richard slid another paper across the desk. A contract. Senior Trauma Director. Salary numbers Marcus hadn't seen in years. Full medical reinstatement support. Funding for Ava's treatment. Marcus stared silently at the offer while emotions crashed inside his chest. "Why?" he whispered. Richard answered honestly. "Because last night I realized something disgusting about myself." Marcus listened quietly. "I spent years donating to charities and pretending I cared about people," Richard admitted. "But when a tired black man stood at my front door, I treated him like he was less than human." Marcus looked away painfully. Richard continued softly. "My daughter is alive because you showed compassion to people who showed none to you." The room fell silent. Marcus finally looked back at the contract, then slowly closed the folder. Richard frowned slightly. "You don't want it." Marcus stood and walked toward the giant office windows overlooking Houston. "I do," he admitted quietly. "More than anything." He turned back slowly. "But I'm scared." Richard looked surprised. Marcus swallowed hard. "Because the last time I trusted a hospital system, they destroyed my life." Richard stood too. "Then don't trust words," he replied. "Trust actions." Weeks later, Marcus walked through the emergency room halls of Whitmore Memorial Hospital wearing a doctor's coat again. Nurses greeted him respectfully. Patients smiled thankfully. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like himself again. But not everyone welcomed his return. Some doctors whispered behind his back. Others questioned whether he truly deserved reinstatement. One surgeon muttered quietly near the nurse's station, "Feels like a publicity stunt." Marcus heard every word, but this time something had changed inside him. He no longer needed their approval to know his worth. Late one evening, Marcus finished surgery after saving a teenage shooting victim. Exhausted nurses applauded softly when the patient stabilized. As Marcus removed his gloves, his phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "Guess who's finally coming home tomorrow?" Marcus sat down, suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. For months he feared losing her. Now she was surviving. Tears quietly filled his eyes while hospital lights reflected across the empty hallway. A voice suddenly spoke nearby. "You earned this." Marcus looked up. Richard Whitmore stood there watching him. Marcus smiled faintly. "No," he replied softly. "I fought for it." Richard nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, Marcus finally believed his future belonged to him again.